Hello.
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 We have a thing. We always start with just like hello, hello, and then the guests sometimes there's like
But they usually get it.
they usually get it, but it's always
I
an
think we
interesting thing because each time is going to be different, which is cool.
I
Jason
think we nailed
Ackerman
it.
I
kind
think
of
so.
messed it up. We told him that too. We're
Yeah.
like, Jason, you're
Yeah.
the first
Ackerman
guest to
messed
mess
it
it
up.
up.
Spencer Nix, what's up, man? Welcome. Good to see you.
Great to see you guys. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this and happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. What have you been looking forward to about it?
Well, for a long time, I told myself a story that I was the only one that felt like a gym or a fitness center should somehow incorporate psychology and biology. And then I come across or reconnect to a large extent with you guys. And I was just so thrilled to see what you guys were doing and the way that you were saying it. And um, yeah, I'm at a place in my life where I feel like I'm not trying to be competitive, but I'm trying to be creative. And so to see what you guys are doing and
Mhm.
just to have an open conversation is something that, yeah, is just really appealing to me.
Yeah. It's cool to have that. I personally find it very I guess inspiring, but empowering maybe, of like not having it be necessarily competition, but to your point, this creativity, this formal or informal collaboration, this
Hmm.
very mutual, like, oh, cool, like we like see what Spencer's doing down there. That's really awesome. Some different people doing some different things,
Hmm.
and just kind of having this feeding itself type of thing. And we talked about it a little bit when we chatted last, but like to buttress against maybe the isolation that comes with being in the fitness industry.
Yeah. And I think I don't know how it is up in New Jersey, but here for many years, my mentality was, and I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but it was competitive, even as a business owner. And,
Mm.
I didn't want to see other people succeed. And I thought they had to lose for me to win. And,
Mhm.
as I've done this for longer and longer, I realize that's not true. And especially as we're proceeding in the direction that we are, it feels uh, a lot healthier of a journey because of that. Like we were talking before we started recording, to see your website and to see how awesome it is. I think the Spencer 15 years ago would be wildly jealous of it. But now it's like,
Mm.
oh man, that's so great. Like I love the way that they put that together. And like you said, it sparks this inspiration and further um, courage, I think,
Mm.
to be bold and to try to make these connections in ways that I think a few years ago was almost like a taboo to talk about.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
It's like great also that you're just honest about that because I think that's
Mhm.
very common, but most people don't like, no, 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 I would never feel like that. But it is cool. And we shared this last time, your social media, every time I see it, there is that like, that's so awesome. And then, I think naturally it sparks like a desire for yourself then to be like, okay, how can I be inspired by this or not for certainly not like steal it, but like have that you're open to a different way of presenting maybe what you're doing and then you see it presented a different way like oh yeah that's another way to go and I think all that stuff is just a positive
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I feel like there's the metaphors and stuff like that we talk about, but it's like there's plenty of fire hydrants and you don't have to piss on all of them. It's like,
Yeah, that's good.
like there's so many fire hydrants and you know, But anyway,
Yeah, I do think what's interesting and strange and sometimes frustrating about the fitness industry, we were talking about it the other day, and maybe it's changing with people like you and us, but sometimes fitness is just like, well, it's just fitness. You're a fitness place, they're a fitness place. It's like, oh, you want to, whatever is happening inside those walls just gets kind of lumped into this one category. And I think sometimes that can be frustrating because you're trying to set yourself apart or say, hey, this is why we're different. Not maybe better, just to get the right people and to get that word out there. And often you get just kind of labeled as like, well, it's just fitness. And that can be tough to create that distinction, I think. But perhaps that's, I don't know, maybe it's we're getting there. So
Not even just tough. I find it one of the most frustrating things ever because, and I don't know your story completely, Bill. I mean, we talked just a little bit, but at least for me, I feel like everything that I've worked through cognitively has come from my association with fitness. And so to me, like I hold the gym as like this really sacred place that's capable of doing so much. And so when someone does, like you just said, like reduce it down to something so superficial and so, you could say like narcissistic or, like so surface level, um, it's hard for me not to be. I mean, that's like the battle I feel like I'm fighting. It's like, no, 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 you don't get it. Like you don't understand what this place really is. And yeah, and I know you guys feel the same way.
yeah, like almost it's not transactional. It doesn't have to be transactional. And there's certainly places that do that, and that's fine. But yeah, and of course, it comes from a place of you see what it's done for you personally, and you want to, of course, help share that with other people and show them like, look how powerful this can be if you are open to it. But that's kind of also where the road divides, I think. And I'm sure you've had plenty of people come through your doors that it's like not, maybe they don't get it.
Yeah,
But
and I think because I've been doing this for 20 years, that's because I'm at that place. It's what I want to lead with with everybody. And I really was like, man, if I was 22 and a 40-year-old came and was telling me to project ahead with when they die and tell me your narrative, I'd be like, hey man, I'm just trying to like not be fat. So I
yeah,
get it, and I have to remind myself, like, I was there at one point, and um, yeah, I feel like this thing that we're doing is such a it's it's anti it's like anti sales, it's anti fitness because nothing here is like a short term solution, even relationship, right? I mean, it's like I have to, and I know it's the same in therapy as well. It's like I have to earn the right to even have that conversation with you, and then to a large extent, I think that some of those conversations can't happen until, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. It's not going to happen while the sun's shining. You know what I mean? Like, to use another metaphor, it's like
yeah.
somebody's had to experience some darkness, or they've at least had to project ahead, or even simulate what that might be like in their life, and then I feel like that's when we can go to that level. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I would agree in that on certainly on the statement of at 22 and 40 and what are you thinking about, and there's always like phases or seasons of life or experience, and I don't think we want to admit it as much as it exists, but like timing is a huge factor, and like the time period in our life that we're in currently, it's almost impossible to like actually supplant yourself in a different time period or environment. like future. Like I won't know what it's like, and hopefully I won't know what it's like for a very long time to get a piece of medical information that suggests I'm coming home soon.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hope that's very long from now. And we can like cognitively go through these exercises, and they're great to do that. And I think that's, memento mori and all of these stoic types of different things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that the like lived reality of each person is that, where they're at that point in their life, the timing of whatever the lesson and the nugget might be, it could be so good, but if the timing just isn't not the right time, but the time that allows that nugget to, or that seed to really grow, that's just what it is,
Mm-hmm.
But the part about, the deeperness, the more depth to it, that was something that when I first met Cariana and at her gym and CrossFit, it was the first time it was the first time I was part of CrossFit. That's what struck me most, was that this wasn't about coming from college athletics and then preparing for the military. There's a very performance driven intent with exercise. I'm training in the off season so that when I put the jersey on, I'll be stronger, faster, better at the sport I'm playing. I'll be able to run faster, hopefully, do more things right in that performance piece. But when I met Cariana, it was like what really struck me. One of the things was like, oh wow, this is like we're doing movements and we're doing workouts here, but there is something so much deeper than six packs and PRs and stuff. And I think being an athlete, that was so different because it was the experience needed to pull me out of that time of train to perform. And it really kind of was this thing of like, now you experience through workout. And that was like a
But do you think that's CrossFit? Do you think that was CrossFit at the time? Do you think that was like
No, I think
the
it was you.
littlest?
I think it was you because of and not every coach was like that.
Mhm.
There were some coaches that were like, okay, thanks for protecting me and teaching me how to do a deadlift. Like I value that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the individual, and I think that's the thing, like the uniqueness and what that person also is going through at that time in their life or has been through in their life, their experiences, adding the uniqueness to then how they create, disseminate, and involve others in these experiences where it's like just so much deeper. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Was that intentional? Like, was that something that you consciously thought about as you were coaching at that stage? Like, hey, I want to really, touch these people at a deeper level, or yeah, we're doing the workout, but we're going to try to incorporate like this little nugget in that way,
Mhm.
or was it just something that was happenstance?
Yeah, I mean, I found CrossFit after being in fitness for however long, 10 years maybe, like traditional personal training, NASM, teaching spinning, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I found CrossFit, to me, there was this experiential piece, like something different than that. And so, I was at kind of a transformative period of my life, but I think that because that resonated with me, that's kind of what I just carried forward and tried to sprinkle in, and
Mm-hmm.
into, which is kind of an interesting thing because I at the time did I was at like a regional athlete at the time. And so there was that like competitive piece, but I think that's also why it became kind of unhealthy for me because it was deeper and then there was the competitive piece and I think it was like at odds a bit.
Hmm.
But for most people, I felt like this is something that's just super powerful for them to. I mean, it is kind of the Greg Glassman thing, like, you know, that talk he gave um, at the like affiliate gathering in Montana where he was talking about like get everybody in your gym to put what they want in a hat. I want to be a better father. I want to be better at my job, blah, blah, blah. And then like in 6 months, ask them how it's going. So I guess it's kind of that, but just I think you have to be intentional with that in the culture you create in any gym, CrossFit or not. It doesn't just happen just because you're doing wall balls or, it's not the movements.
I agree with that. I agree with that quite a bit.
So your gym, tell us a little bit, or,
This is
explain.
Spencer, everybody.
Yeah,
We
Spencer. Go back.
15 minutes.
Yeah,
to,
they're like, I'm glad
not-
you just picked up where you guys left off, but what the hell? So
people
tell
are
us,
like, what's happening?
Who is this
Hold
guy?
yeah, tell us, who is Spencer? Tell us about your current
life.
Predicament. So much like you guys, I started a gym in 2008 here in Dallas. It was called the CrossFit Dallas Central. And shortly after, like maybe 6 or 8 months later, I was like, oh, I really liked the seminar experience, and so I'll do that as well. So almost in conjunction with opening a gym, it was a much different process to get on staff at that point, but pretty much started those two journeys at the same time, and have had, lots of wonderful and really tough experiences as a business owner and as a fitness professional. And then let's call it 2018, had a really hard season where, and kind of to the extent that you guys were talking about, like there just seemed to be a disconnect between what I wanted to do and the impact that I wanted to have, and this model that had been set up. It didn't seem like I could really demand that impact to happen every single time. And some of those things that I want to say I don't disagree with, but I just wanted to tease out in greater detail, was if you get people into a group, like how can you make them a better father? Like what are the actual things that you have to do, so it's not just a happy accident. We talk about the black box model, and I loved that, but I wanted just to have. I'm someone that likes systems, and I want to know, like, what could I really do to influence that? Maybe not control, but influence that better. And so I was a little, I don't know if burnout's the right word, but a little just frustrated with how little influence it felt like I had. 2018, lots of people coming in, but we had no structure around the business as far as, someone could come in and not have a single conversation with someone intentionally from when they started to when they decided that they didn't want to be a member anymore. And so taking that, other things that I'm sure are quite common, like the coaches had no incentive to be professionals because we were paying them by the hour, and they quickly figured out, like, okay, I'm going to have to do lots of private training if I'm going to be able to pay my bills. And so there was just a lot of stuff that wasn't great. And then COVID happened. There was a series of things that happened where some of these ideas that I had um, about giving everyone a personal coach, but remaining within a group, starting to customize a little bit more versus just kind of shout scaling recommendations at the whiteboard. These were things that, because of COVID, we were able to basically do whatever the hell we wanted, because there was no protocol on what you were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we put everyone, as there was, shelter in place, we put everyone on a personal training software. And so instead of doing, Zoom or anything like that, we said, you know what, this is going to be an opportunity to give everyone a taste of what it feels like to have a really bespoke and customized program. And it was manageable because they had little equipment, right? Us, like I'm sure a lot of gyms, we rented out, not rented, but we basically, like, handed out all of our equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew that we could we could handle creating these basically templated programs that felt very personalized for them. And then the great fortune we had is that right when COVID happened, we were moving into a different facility. And as they came back to work out in the gym, we kept all of that. And so there were some initial things that were kind of just a happy accident that we decided to maintain. And then the ball just kept rolling. Every member has their own coach. Every person has these required check-ins where they sit down, they have a one-on-one conversation. My background's in cognitive science, and when I got into fitness and fell in love with CrossFit, it was never even a thought that those worlds would combine. But in conjunction with some of the changes from a business standpoint, it just made more and more sense that you couldn't really separate what someone's thoughts and behaviors were from their results from a fitness standpoint. And so much so that I feel like at this point, behavior, thoughts, identity, if you can't start to have some type of conversation around that, then back to that original thesis of how could you influence, like you're really handcuffed to connect with the member on a level that could do exactly what Coach Glassman mentioned. Otherwise, it's just a happy accident.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, we had made all these changes and I was pretty happy with the way that it was going. But this weird thing, and this was, probably like the end of 2021, people would come in and now they had to have a sit down conversation and we just hear what it is they're looking for. And we tell them all these cool things that we were doing and they would be disappointed at it. Like they would be like, kind of put off that we were suggesting something that wasn't CrossFit with whatever traditional CrossFit at this point looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And that was challenging because in my mind, it's like, no, you don't get it. Like it's CrossFit, but it's
Better.
plus this. And it's all these things because I know what it's like to only do that one thing. And it was just a huge disconnect. It was a huge misread. And so a buddy of mine was hearing me complain about this and he said, "Hey man, you've changed everything internally. When are you going to change the name?" And it just gutted me because,
Right.
I'm loyal to CrossFit. Like you're talking about Coach Glassman. I feel like I owe so much to him. And there's so much just in that journey of, almost 15 years where I felt like I was turning my back on not being called that. But the more I thought about it, it did feel like the name was misrepresentative. It's not that CrossFit's bad and what we're doing is good, but just as I mentioned, I wanted something that conveyed more accurately what we were on the path to do.
Yeah.
And so, man, we hired like a brand strategist, and on the way home from Colorado, my wife and I, we got like a pen and pad, and she was writing out hundreds of words, like, okay, this is a good word, this is a good word, just like this huge list of words. And we landed on behavior and performance research after a whole lot of dialogue. And I mentioned this to the brand strategist. He's like, that's a terrible name. You can't call it that. He's like, it sounds like a 70s government institution. I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah,
That's what I want.
Yeah.
Because I wanted something a little speakeasy. I wanted something a little less sounding like hard ass gym. No offense if somebody's listening to this and their gym's called hard ass, but something that felt a little bit more robust, felt a little bit more multidimensional. And so
it requires a little bit of like inquisition too. It's not like because it's like, oh, that's a gym. Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Not just maybe like hard ass fitness. You kind of know what you're getting.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if that answers the the question that you were looking for, but that's where we're at right now. And I'm in a weird place from a coaching standpoint because I don't feel like, how should I say this? So much of fitness is mathematical. It's percentages and it's progressions. And stepping into this world of coaching behavior and coaching identity and coaching mindset, it's such a different skill set, and it feels so much more like being a craftsman and being an artist, that for many years I relied on my capacity to memorize stuff and kind of be a showman. And I'm
Perform.
realized, yeah, right. I mean, you talk about the level one. I mean, it's like you're this, Broadway actor doing, 1,000 shows a year, and what is fitness and all this stuff. And it's just, it has so little to do with being a know-it-all, and it feels like it has so much more to do with humility and not really being attached to an outcome. Because like I said earlier, my desire is like, I just want to fix people, the same way I kind of fix myself. And you realize, like, it's not really the game that I'm now saying I want to play.
Right.
And so from a coaching standpoint, I feel, even getting on, with lots of honesty with you guys, I was like, man, I don't really have much that I need to show in terms of like what I know. It's like, I don't really know what I can contribute, because that's how I feel at this point as a coach. It's like I'm trying to transition to the level of kind of being this Jedi, where it's not even me doing anything, but it's just kind of sitting back and like asking the right questions. And
Yeah. It's
yeah.
funny because we have this, I'm coaching, training, whatever the word, it doesn't, it's funny that you say that, 'cause I don't even know what the word is. Like,
Right.
I operate and provide space
Operator.
for people at the gym.
You're an operator. That sounds right.
I'm an operator. And like, I'll come home and be like, I don't know, because I know one of the posts you put up that was like so great was about choosing the right movements. Like, so when we talked about this, but like, so you're not, like, if you're coaching a barbell snatch, there's a lot that has to go into that movement so that the person is safe. When you stop coaching such high, when you're, when those high skill, very technical movements maybe aren't part of the everyday, it provides a lot more space to coach the human. And there are days where I'm like, our people will go in. We have like an open policy, so they can go in on their own and do their own workouts. I mean, some people will, some won't, but it is much more of a connection situation. Like, what did I like get them better at fitness today? But is that really like the goal? Like, that person isn't going and competing in a powerlifting meet in 4 months and working on, like, their deadlift and bringing in their straps and whatnot. And so it's also, when you relied on, or when that was the being able to run a class and knees out, da da da, Spencer, good, get your chest up, and just like, and stand and down, and like, that was like regarded as like, yeah, you can cue and coach, and that's great for what that is. But it is kind of finding the value again and being like, oh, okay, this is valuable. Like, people are finding value in this. It's not just because, they didn't get 10 cues on their squat in that set of 20. Like, that's not what we're doing. That's not what that's not when they walk out the door, what had them feel like that was a really great experience in our gym.
And to hear you say that makes me think, in that previous model, it was so easy to feel successful yourself as a coach. Like, there were things, it's like, man, if I could just nail this, it's a great hour. And now I'm kind of searching for, man, how do I even know I did a good job? and that's my own hangups, right? Because I want the pat on the head, and I want to feel like, oh man, I did a really good job here. But I think what we're talking about is it's just it's a different game. It's one I want to play, but it's just like you said, it's like, why? Okay, what are they really here for? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not even related to the workout.
Yeah.
Right. And I think as coaches, guides, whomever, whatever we're labeling it as, I think we've done our job when the client, the member, whomever can turn to us before, during, after, whatever the session, and with honesty say, I don't need you. We've done our job. But I really value this. I want this. I know, like, I don't need you anymore. And I think that's when, as coaches and guides, we can be like, and that's, I think, the Jedi. And having, like, the performance nature of different models, different types of classes, different experiences, even, those are very much about the coach. And a little personal bone I have to pick with that is coaching by definition it's not about the coach. It's not about the guide. It's not about that. It's about the person who you're coaching, right? And I've been there too, where when I first started coaching CrossFit classes, I realized too, like, wow, I'm making this all about me. And what's difficult with that is, as a former athlete, like, the coach doesn't go onto the field and play the game for you. There's a hard limit to where the coach can go. And you've put a post up that we refer to about movement selection and like an elevated view on the movements that we program for people. And one of the things we loved so much about that was, and what's cool about the collaborative kind of thing of, like, rising tides and whatnot, is like, we've said to our people, or internally for sure, to the two of us, like, we're coaching humans. We're coaching humans. We're not coaching body parts. We're not coaching equipment. We're not running, like operating a machine, like a crane. Like, okay, if I pull on this, that happens. Like, that's just not how it goes. And so, for that deeper connection, diving into the, well, what do I do if I don't have to tell someone to get their knees out? It's like, yeah, that's the elevated problem to solve as a coach who's guiding someone through identity, behavior, life, whatever, whatever.
And not
it
to
might
say
be.
we don't, like, if someone is squatting, you're not ever going to help them do it correctly. I mean,
yeah, of course
it's
not.
like Spencer's picturing our gym with people just knees touching. Like, we're not gonna.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But I mean, it's certainly. I was one of our coaches the other day. I had a conversation with one of our former coaches, and I kind of realized how much. A great example of that is when there's a workout in a CrossFit gym where it's like rowing, just rowing, or rowing and push-ups, like. And for me, when we would have those workouts, I loved those because it provided that was like an opportunity. You didn't have to, people weren't bouncing around. They weren't all over the gym. You could really speak to people and kind of layer in some things because you weren't so busy with keeping people safe and, making sure they don't kill themselves. But I think a lot of coaches, and I think not to go back to CrossFit, but even that little piece I think could elevate so many CrossFit gyms if they didn't want to maybe go all the way to where we're all going, to just get a little more comfortable with that, because I think a lot of coaches are uncomfortable with that. They'll just turn up the music, or it's kind of like sit in the corner. I don't know, but that's like a great opportunity to not maybe connect with people because they're still in the workout, but it's just kind of an interesting thing that there's a reliance on the technical, and that's the mark of coaching. And yeah, we kind of disagree. So
yeah, it's like, what do I do if I'm not able to brief at the whiteboard, call people up and down in a squat, or offer correction? And it's great that you say that. Because we're not programming high intensity workouts every day, a couple of times a week, it'll be zone 2, very, very loose structure. So there's lots of ways to navigate this. And because we're still meeting in group sessions a few times a day, we've talked as a staff like, hey, this is what you're going to do at this moment. And it's everyone's favorite days, just because you didn't realize that, hey, that way to connect with people, that's actually what culture is. Like, that's actually what community is. Like this thing of, hey, look how great I did, queuing everyone up and down. Like that's PE. That's not creating a culture with adults. Like, culture is creating these moments where people can connect either with you or with each other. And these days that you're describing are, if it's a classic CrossFit workout, it has to happen after the fact, right? I'm convinced that this thing that we're all, holding on to very delicately, this, group training and culture and all this stuff, it's because of what happens like after the actual workout. It has little to do, in my opinion, with how great the coach is at coaching. And as I hear us talk, maybe a better words, like, what do we call ourselves now? Like, maybe it's a Sherpa, right? Because the Sherpa gets no attention. It's like this the other guy going up the mountain, and they're just kind of like, doing the heavy lifting for him.
Yeah. And that I think that is also why there are CrossFit gyms or CrossFit classes with coaches that aren't technically great, and people love that gym. They love their community. And so, it's like, okay, so we can get better technically, and sure, that's something, but the gym still is thriving, and the coach is technically terrible maybe, but like, okay, then it's not just about, there's something amiss there. So
yeah. Fun fact, and I think I told
is
you
it
this
fun?
more. It's fun.
Okay.
It's fun for me. It's fun for me.
Sounds
You
fun.
were one of my level 1 instructors.
Yeah, it's funny.
I was telling somebody that earlier today. I was excited to get on here with you guys, and I only did like a handful of military seminars. In fact, I didn't get out of Texas very much, but so this, the one at Fort Hood is one that sticks out in my mind, and it's pretty crazy to.
I was the only civilian there outside of the instructors.
Yeah, 'cause
that
he
was
wasn't
right
in
before
yet,
I went.
Aha.
Which I felt I felt like I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. All of those human insecurities. And then I also felt like this deeper desire to gain entry into that community, speaking of community and culture. And then, moved home and met some blonde.
Well, I was thinking like, what could be a good transition, but there's really none. But so I'm just gonna transition us because I'm curious. Like we relaunched the podcast a few episodes ago, and it coincided with launching the dose that you've been, you subscribe to. And so we thought it would be really cool with the podcast to have guests do one of the workouts. So far, people have voluntarily, or we've voluntold them to do it, and they haven't fought back. But for sure, and it's always cool to hear people's experience. But in particular, I'm like really excited to hear about yours because we share, because you do share this
No stranger to deeper.
mindset,
Yeah.
deeper connection, using a workout as a tool. So we're curious to, I think for some people, we gave them kind of like, hey, here's the workout. And, we kind of offered up to you, like, pick one, if you've done more than one, that you thought was particularly, for whatever reason, you wanted to share. So yeah, what do you got?
I've done several of them, and I don't leave many of these feeling like a super athlete. There's several. It's like, Jesus Christ, that was really hard.
That was like me Tuesday night as well, testing next week's.
Oh man, my wife and I did the one that you guys put up this week, and
cool.
Nice.
for those that don't know what that is, it's a death by format, which personally is one of my favorites because it means that you will fail at some point. And so it means you have to reconcile the fact that you will not be successful with this workout.
Right.
Even if you've postulated that to get to a certain round, it means you're a tough guy. I mean, at some point, there is this moment. Yeah. There's this moment where you say, I didn't do it.
Right.
What's tricky, and I'm sure that you guys are the same way, is that I've done so many iterations of this that I self-herded through most of this workout, thinking that I knew what I was going to experience. And so for those listening or watching that don't know what the workout was, it was a round of Cindy in the first minute, and then transition to a Concept 2 bike for the second minute. And you wanted to make the bike portion challenging but doable in terms of consistency. Did I get that right so far?
Perfect. Yep.
Do you remember there was a period of time where it was really popular to have like a round of Cindy and then do a minute on the bike? It wasn't death by, but it was like basically an AMRAP back and forth. So I had done several versions of that a few years ago. So I kind of knew what I should be doing on the rower. And I thought, well, if I can do that on the rower, I can sure as hell do it on the Concept 2
and only
bike.
one round of Cindy.
Right. But I thought, okay, 40 seconds for a round of Cindy, all good. To carry this forward, the format that you guys came up with, as you go back to Cindy, it's an additional minute. And I want some clarification. My wife and I, we didn't start the second round of Cindy until the clock beeped. I don't know if that was right or wrong, but that's how we interpreted it. So we did a round, waited the remaining part of the minute, did a second round, and that's how we kept going. Was that the way that you guys?
Interesting. So this is, and I'll be quick with this. It's accurate because you did it with intention, like, and you had a thought, and it was like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. When I did it, I was thinking, not to interrupt it. So like,
Gotcha.
You had 2 minutes to do 2 rounds.
So if you did,
so you kept
if
going
at 40 seconds you finished your 15th squat, at 41, you're walking back to the pull-up bar, but not a wrong way by any means.
But the way you did it, I think,
I like
is
that.
more challenging.
Yeah, I really
because
like
it's
that.
like
Yeah.
it's like Mary, isn't it? Mary is Mary who
the
30-minute Imam
Bar-
Cindy. It's the one where it's 30 minutes of every minute on the minute, and you start out and you're like, yeah, this is like 7 minutes in.
I like the way you did it.
But that is tough because you're never buying time. You're never gaining that extra bit.
So I did 20 cals on the bike, and I did strict pull-ups, and I pooped out right at the beginning of 6. And I saw your score, Bill, and I thought, I mean, that was also challenging. So it's like, man, I really want to try to get to, I don't know why I said this, but I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool to get to where Bill got. But at that point, it was like It was really hard. It was really hard. And,
Yeah.
to make matters worse, my wife is like 5'2" and has really short limbs. And so we were facing each other this whole time. And, she was doing like 2,
Uh-huh.
3 squats for my one. And so this whole scenario, except for the bike, because I'm, a lot heavier than her, that was the
But
only
she
time
didn't
I
do
felt like,
20,
what's
I hope
that?
she didn't I hope she didn't do 20 calories on the bike.
No, she did
Okay.
12.
Okay, good. I'm like, that would be terrible.
She did, and I think she nailed it. She got all the way through the 6 rounds and back on the bike, and
Wow.
almost finished that. She's a better athlete than I am. So I had all these great inputs that were really challenging to find some way that I could be proud of what I did, or the directive that you guys gave to just, what were the words that you had?
Stay
I don't
with
want
it.
to butcher.
Stay
Yeah, to stay with
Stay
it.
with
So
it.
that was my mantra. But the
Yeah.
mantra knowing full well that there was going to be some point where I couldn't stay with it.
Yes.
So I thought it was awesome. I'm, full disclosure, really sore. We did it a
Yeah.
couple
I'm
days
sure.
ago.
Yeah.
And some of the thoughts, the hot wash, the after action report is how, at this stage, I need to stop looking back and trying to have some frame of reference for what
Mm-hmm.
I judge as a good performance,
Mm-hmm.
to just have these workouts where it's like, hey, let me just be really present in the moment, to not have these expectations of, because some of that stuff I was talking about, that's like 8 years ago.
Right.
I'm a completely different human. I'm a completely different athlete. Like
Right.
honestly, me comparing myself to that would be like me comparing myself to, one of you. It's like, it's not really
right.
the same. So that was the thought that I had, how when you've been doing something for so long, it's easy to immediately, like, reach in the cookie jar of past experiences and try to
Yeah.
project what you're going to experience, versus almost treating this with like a new set of eyes and a new set of, limbs as you're going through this. And that was, I think, the biggest, like, revelation. Not to go off on a weird tangent, um but we talked about my wife and just being married. I feel like we're in a place where we're both evolving, and so it's the same person, but I need like a new set of eyes to see like who she is. And I feel like there's some similarities to exercise, like these workouts that you guys are prescribing. They're so good, and most of them, I've told myself this really boring narrative that I've experienced every combination of functional fitness that you can produce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it turns out like that's not true. Or even if it is true, that story isn't doing me any favors. You know what I mean? Like, I can tell that story that I'm telling myself, that I'm kind of this salty veteran of programming,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
doing me no service at all. And some of these workouts has just been a great kick in the pants to be like, you know what? You need to have a new set of eyes for some of these things that you think you're so familiar with. And you have to realize that the person that you are today is not the person that was doing CrossFit 15 years ago.
Yeah. That sounds when you just shared that, that sounds to me like it come out of your mouth speaking to your members
Hmm.
verbatim. Maybe not CrossFit 15 years ago, but like who you are today, who you are right now is what we're focusing on. And
Mm-hmm.
who you are right now en route to becoming who you want to be. But let's not let who you were control who you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Behavior change, identity change, all of the, research and development going down at your gym, right? It's like an incubator for behavior and identity change in a culture and an environment that supports that type of growth on purpose, not just the happy accidents, not just the, daisy growing between the cracks in the sidewalk. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's a beautiful notion to potential and resiliency. But like, oh, the actual environment that you and your wife and your team are creating down at your gym supports the kind of growth to behavior and to identity and to an expansive experience of self. And when you say that in relation to the salty veteran who's done every combination of Cindy and Murph and Barbara and Mary and like all of the things, right? Like push up, pull up, squat. How many multiples of that can we do? And to have the realization and the connection point be like the value to almost receive what it is that you're creating and dosing others with, which is evolution or evolving self.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. Can be being a business owner can be a very lonely road, and you put so much focus on others. That's the thing I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, hey, this thing you're getting into, it's worth it, but it's going to be a lot different than you think it is. It's going to be a lot less about what you're going to get out of it. And I think just to hear that from you is great, and it feels good to get some coaching sent my way. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think one. So does your wife coach as well? I feel a little bit bad she's not on here. She's just a stud athlete.
That would have been cool. Maybe another time. No, she's our kids are in a really cool. Our kids are pretty young. They're 9, 6, and 4, and 2 of them are in a hybrid school where a couple days a week they're on campus, and then a couple days a week they're at home. So Kelly, my wife, is the co-teacher, on those days. So she's been a mom and focused on that, but did coach a little bit before we had kids. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, how did you get into fitness and fitness as a profession? I don't think we.
Oh man. So I was not a great athlete growing up. I feel like sometimes there's a misconception that people are in the fitness industry because they've had just all this excess potential just bleeding out, and they want to share it with others. But I had some really challenging experiences growing up. I have lots of family that was in the Navy, and so towards the end of high school, I was like, "Hey, I want to go to the Naval Academy," and I was a good student. Didn't play any sports. Grew up with some pretty bad allergies and asthma, and so when I took you have to take a physical aptitude test for the academy. I failed it. So I got a congressional appointment, if you're familiar with that process, and I had the
Yeah.
grades and I had the ACT scores.
Wow. Yeah.
But I didn't get in, and a lot of it was because of the just like having never done any of that stuff.
Right. Wow.
And so that was a huge blow. I mean, I was already an insecure kid, and so to have that was really tough. Down here in Texas, there's a school called A&M, which is pretty well known, but they have an ROTC program.
Yeah.
And so I entered that just because I was like, okay, I'll go here for a year, and then there's like kind of this back door where you can get into the academy. And so that was my plan. But when I got down to A&M, in the core, as it's called, you go on runs every morning. And I instantly couldn't keep up. It's a formation run. I mean, they're pretending to be in the military, so a lot of the things you would assume are kind of like they are in the the army, or
Yeah.
the real military. And so I was put in this remedial PT program with basically a bunch of fat kids and me, and I was in there for an entire year. And so you have these two experiences where it was like, hey, I've got to figure this out. Like, this fitness thing that I didn't think was important, it turns out like it's making my life like a living hell. It's making my life miserable. And so, I started to investigate, like, what are some things that I could do, and what are some things that I could control. And, at first it was something that was just, how can I get out of this group of fat kids, to be really blunt. And then, you start to figure out, like, and also I was a late bloomer, so I was, when I graduated high school, really skinny, same height. I'm 6'2", but I was 160 pounds. I mean, that's pretty thin.
Yeah.
And so, as I was learning this stuff, my body also was, developmentally changing, which was lucky. And so, long story short, it was something that went from a huge insecurity to something that I felt like, okay, I can finally get out of this, group. And then over several years, it was something that just turned into like a full blown passion, and almost an obsession, probably not necessarily in a really healthy way to start.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, a few things happened where I also started personal training. From A&M, went to work in sport performance and did that for a couple of years. And that's when my brother and I first found CrossFit. And yeah, just shortly after that, I came back to Dallas to get my master's in neuroscience. And that's when my brother and I and another friend opened up the gym in 2008. So for the first couple of years, I was in grad school, and I was doing that at the same time. And then, just as CrossFit developed, like, that took all of my attention and focus. And yeah, that's kind of, I'm trying to think if I left anything out. I mean, I think that's kind of the main bullet points there.
It's funny because Bill and I have very different, fitness stories. Or I don't really know. You came to fitness because of me, but
What?
I said you really came to fitness because of me. Like, you didn't open a gym, or like your fitness
Yeah, for sure.
has been like for a purpose.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Mhm.
my story is actually very similar to yours,
really?
Spencer, where I was just like never, I mean, I did ski team, I did tennis, like I was not an athlete. And it is funny because people always assume, like, oh, you're an athlete, what sports you play. It's like I didn't. I would never call myself an athlete. Gymnastics at an early age, but never had, even the, I guess for me, like that commitment or that discipline, like, when I see even our kids like practice, like that's totally foreign to me. Like I didn't even, like, had no interest in that. And then I went abroad for a year. I deferred my admission to school and went to Norway, which is where I have citizenship and family, and wanted to do that. And basically, it
Cool.
was a year of, I wouldn't say like debauchery, but quite a bit of going out, not eating healthy. So came back, had gained, some weight, like did not do any fitness. I mean, walking to the bus to go out was like the most fitness we did. But then when I came back, like a friend asked me if I wanted to start going to the gym, and the process for me was that of personal, yeah, like growth, like, wow, I can like impact a change, I can make a change. And I just remember seeing when I first saw like a visual aesthetic result, and it was like, wow, like this is working.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on to like get a job at University of Maryland in the rec department, and kind of the same. I went, of course, totally overboard, and it became, completely like obsessive. And then, you find you balance out. But yeah, not the athlete thing. While now I do identify with some of those traits of like, I guess, an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like an imposter because I was never like officially an athlete. So, but I think that is probably why there's something deeper. For
Yeah.
Bill, his
Yeah.
experience is kind of, this is for a purpose. This is like got a function and a job. And for me, it was just like, yeah, this was like personally super rewarding, and that's more common for most people. What they're going to find from fitness, not the performance piece.
Yeah, the interesting part of, and I bet you have some similarities as well, but initially it was kind of what we were saying at the very beginning of our conversation. It was these things that I was really insecure about on the outside. But then through CrossFit, I think as a lot of people achieve after a certain point, it's like, hey, I was in really good shape. Like I got to a point where it's like, hey, I don't look like a punk anymore. But I realized that it didn't make me happy. Like, and I think that was kind of this crossroads at 2014 to 2018. It's like, hey, this thing that you kind of put on this pedestal, that if you could finally get it, it would solve all your problems.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't do jack shit.
Mm-hmm.
And even arriving there, it was a huge letdown. Like it was just a huge existential crisis. Like, okay, what's the point here? And what I determined is that I was still the really insecure 16-year-old. And I like to joke that my pre-workout for, you know, 15 years was imposter syndromes, right? Like that's the thing that fueled
Yeah.
me to do all this stuff. And it was not until I could come up with a different reason for exercise, that it wasn't because I was insecure, but actually I'd fallen in love with this. And when I do it, it makes me feel better, and I can be a better dad, and I can be a better father. But that took a lot of counseling, and a lot of journaling, and a lot of
Yeah.
just introspection to arrive at that point. That even, and it's kind of what we were talking about, right? Like, even though we had done all the stuff that we were supposed to do, it was just so myopic. It was so short-sighted of what fitness was really supposed to be like.
Do you mind me asking, what did you put on the pedestal that was supposed to be the savior?
I think for so many years I had told myself that I was too sensitive, too skinny, not masculine enough, hadn't had experiences that would let me know that I had what it took. Really, it came down to not feeling good enough. And I thought
Yeah.
that if I could get to a point where, statistically speaking, that physically I was good enough, that would mean that I was good enough on the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's
Yeah.
really powerful to hear. And I think it's also speaks to this deeper, it's like an archetypal, I don't know what the right word. It's an archetype that
Hmm.
men typically um, experience more of, that proving oneself, and in different regards, and like this question of this question of, will I be enough to perform when asked to do so?
Mm-hmm.
And to have experiences that ask that or don't. But when so much, like for me, some of the stuff that I've struggled with is in the military, I feel unsatisfied with my experiences because they didn't answer that question in the way that I wanted to answer it before going in.
Hmm.
And it's like, regardless of if I was really good at my job and got good results and blah, 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 and anything like that, it's like, there's this overemphasis on something that doesn't actually emphasize who you are.
Mm-hmm.
This litmus test, this criteria. I think males have, and different people of different kinds, but it's really refreshing to hear somebody go through that and share it for other people also to hear it and see, like, yeah, am I continuing to pour like water into this cup that's got a hole in the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
And because it is the deeper thing, and to hear both of you like share that finding fitness and getting attached to it and immersed in it from a place of, personal passion first, not, you know, kind of logical purpose in the sense that this is for that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, this is to get out of the group, or this is to, reclaim my health or something, but like hitting hitting that center that we call, like, which is for like the who or the self, like hitting that essence of who you are. And fitness was just the access road to that. It wasn't the destination for it to be. And I think that, like, it's just really cool to I think it's really cool to hear that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. I got to hang out we were in Colorado early this year, and we went skiing with the Chans, Matt and Cherie, which you guys know.
Yeah.
And Matt and I had a great conversation where we connected on that same point, where it's great to, I think, just get older, and it's great to arrive at a point where it's like, pardon my French, but it's like, who the fuck cares? And all these things that you think you need to do to prove yourself, you realize, like, no one was telling you that you had to do that. Like, you
Right.
may have had some experiences where it felt like you weren't enough, but then you get to a certain point where, now it's like, hey, maybe it's because I live with 4 girls, but at this point, it's like, I'm really thankful that I'm sensitive and I have that side,
Yeah.
because for years, like, I just wanted to suppress that. And it meant that I was, more feminine than I was masculine, or, all these things that, these little micro traumas that, I just kind of suppress. I realized, like, hey, that's just kind of like part of who I am. And, um, I I know I'm tough, in certain ways, but, not the toughest person ever. And it's like, God, just who the fuck cares? Pardon the
Yeah.
language, but
I love it. Yeah.
just to kind of cut yourself some slack, and find, and I think what's great is, like, we didn't abandon fitness when we realized, like, hey, that purpose for it wasn't serving us very well, but we
Mm.
were able to kind of reappropriate and remix and go just a little bit deeper, versus I think several people just kind of slough it off as like, okay, if I
Mhm.
if I don't want to be narcissistic with this anymore, then I just can't do it. And I think
Right.
what I see with you guys, and what's a wonderful thing to share in, is just that it can be so much more, right? It's so
Mhm.
much more significant than the stuff that we, sounds like both of us kind of initially gravitated towards.
Very cool. Um. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking out now. I was gonna ask you a question. Oh, yeah. So Whatever happened to the ROTC thing?
Man, A&M is, I don't know how, I'm so close to it that I assume like, oh, everybody knows about A&M and knows about the core. Um, you can go through that full program, and after 2 years, everyone's there on scholarship for the first couple of years, but after a couple of years, you can decide if you'll take a contract
Right.
or um, go what's called DNC, which means drill and ceremony, which means you literally wear the uniform, but you do all the shitty stuff, but you don't go into the military afterwards.
Right.
And some of the experiences that I described to you guys were part and parcel with why I decided not to, but yeah, it just didn't feel like the right decision, and it's one that I don't regret. Like, I
Wow. Good.
love
Good.
everything that's in the military, but I think those experiences thought, okay, I thought it was this, and now with more detail and more clarity, um, yeah, it just was very, very clear and evident that that wasn't my path.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's cool. What's it like to say that? To like, I'm sure I'm sure you. This isn't the first time you said it, but like, on a like, for you to hear yourself. I'm curious for you to hear yourself now saying that. What's it like?
It totally feels authentic. It feels
Mhm.
like, as I look at what I was able to experience, um, man, all the wonderful things that are in my life would be totally different if I had gone down that road.
Yeah.
And so, how I met my wife, how I got into CrossFit, all
Yeah.
these things, that I love and appreciate in my life, and I'm so thankful for. I'm sure something else I would spin it that if I did go in there and I'd say, hey, that was awesome too. Um, but
Right.
I like to look back with great um, reverence and say, man, that was exactly how it was supposed to go. So by saying that out loud, it feels like exactly what um, my journey was supposed to be.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. I love that because there's this like coherency with one's autobiography.
Hmm.
That's like a very good indicator of psychological health and mental fitness, emotional fitness, however you want to say. And
Yeah.
to have it be part of a coherent story with this is where I was kind of to the timing bit, and this is what it was, this is what it wasn't, this is what I struggled with, this is what I was thinking, and then that morphed into this thing, as opposed to like reading the book and then like just hard like next chapter, no coherency, no overlap, and
Hmm.
the lack of smoothness from one chapter to the other, or the lack of the coherent story is usually like in those pauses or in those breaks in the autobiography. It's almost like, hey, that's maybe where we should do some work,
Yeah.
because we want to live like this kind of coherent, smooth thing. And um, I just also like with what you're doing with the behavior, the behavior coaching too. And some of the exercises that you lead your clients through. It's like it's just a cool thing to share of like having the leader of your community, living it as well. And that's always so powerful. No textbook's going to teach that. No performance is going to validate that. But to have you leading it and leading your people through it is really cool. And so it's like, so what do you have to do to get better as a coach, or what do you do for these people? It's like, well, you just be you, and it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, with the behavior coaching, it's like the reason we're doing this is because I've been the recipient of more of that than anyone in this entire facility. So
Mhm.
if we're a dumb analogy, if we're like a transplant institute, it's like I've received the most transplants here, and that's why I'm in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but when we rebranded, I was really nervous and self-conscious that, there were going to be riots in the streets, that our members would, be so
Yeah.
outraged that we changed the name. And so we had everybody over to our house and, just kind of had like a little celebration. And I shared that story that I shared with you guys, and, shared the second part. It's like, hey, just getting fit didn't really, give me any
Hmm.
type of self-actualization. And it was a really wonderful and special moment to share that, because I could tell that, one, that was a shock to them because I had never really been open like that.
Hmm.
Maybe because I was a little reluctant. Maybe there just, wasn't the great pulpit to have that conversation. But since
Hmm.
then, it's been, uh, what are they? This may not be the right term, but I've heard it called like the Johari window. That when you share something about yourself, like it inclines people to share things about themselves. But
Mm.
from that conversation, it's kind of like open the door for it to be okay, uh, to not be a tough guy, to not be as fit as possible while you're in here, to have some hangups, to not be a finished product, and all these things that uh, has been like a really good thing. So yeah, it's like having the vulnerability to share. I think has been something that is transforming our business as well, versus,
Mhm.
just trying to, back to hard ass fitness, like trying to just project like, how tough you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing, man. This was
Yeah.
awesome. This was great.
This is what we mean by it's tough to like in hours, like, wow, an hour
I
already.
know. I know.
But I guess that's what they
That's
say.
what it
That's
is.
what
That's
they
what we're
say.
doing. Yeah.
We'll have to have a part 2. That's all that means.
Yeah.
Um,
Amy? Or Kelly? Kelly,
Kelly.
sorry.
Bill is terrible with names.
Yeah.
I'm amazed that he
That's why
knows
when I first learned her
Spencer.
name, it was like,
Spencer here. Yeah.
I am Spencer. When I first met Cariana, it was like, that's K, like just the letter.
Yeah, my
I can.
father
We're
was like
good with that.
appalled at the fact that my beautiful Norwegian name was reduced to K, but that's okay.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
You do know my name now,
I
so
do. Yes, I do.
Somehow you made it through that trial.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm gonna. This is it's propping up our bookcase. The field manual, very cool,
Hey,
very very cool. I wanted to put this out there and talk about it.
amazing.
Because people listening might be like, "Well, I don't live in Dallas," and it's like, right, and you can get a taste for Spencer's prescription, I suppose, what you have in the
Yeah.
lab through the field manual, which is really cool. We really love it. Check
it's
it out.
also
It's on
just
Amazon. Yeah.
aesthetically. I went to school for graphic design, not fitness,
Oh,
and
you
so when I
did.
did that, I'm like, this is
Bill, you're
so
lucky
great.
to have her as a business partner.
Listen, uh, without a doubt, in many ways,
I
Well,
mean,
thank you. That means a lot.
super cool. We love it.
yeah.
It's really
So you
awesome. It hits
can
so many
purchase
cool
this.
things. Yeah. So buy this thing. Support
Yeah.
Spencer. He's a real human. And you did this all yourself, right?
Well, yeah, it was kind of in conjunction with the launch party. I just thought it would be
Yeah.
really cool to have like a manifesto to
Yeah.
explain why we were going in this direction. And so,
Love,
yeah, it was
Love it.
really just an internal thing, but we've had friends
love it.
like you guys that have um, just based on curiosity wanted to see it. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool that
Love it.
you guys
Super
have
cool.
that. It means a lot.
Yeah. It's awesome. You want to do the like, where can people find you thing?
What is your
Spencer
Insta
Nix
handle?
got in early on Instagram, so it's just my name, Nix. The gym is where I'm putting most of the consistency with, and that's bpr.institute. And yeah, if you follow, I'll see it. If you leave a comment, I'll respond. And it'd be cool just to
Cool.
honestly, it would be cool to connect with anybody that's I feel like we've planted this flag and we're trying to gather people around it. So I would be super interested just to connect with other fitness professionals or individuals that kind of feel a little disenchanted by, maybe the 2000s model of fitness and is looking for something
Yeah.
more. So that'd be super cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
there's a few people I know that come to mind that I'm fairly certain
They'll gather around the flagpole.
they'll gather. But Spencer, really appreciate it, man. Thank you
Thank you guys so
for
much.
being so open, so honest, and continuing to provide value, man.
Thank you guys. What an honor to be here with you.
Appreciate it.